Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of what you fill your eyes and ears with, the media you consume, the things that are around you. But before we do that, we'll do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
I just wanted to connect with, can you make a sound that's like a yummy sound? So let's go with, can you feel where your body is supported by something underneath or behind it? Or maybe you like putting something like a weighted vest or a pet on top of you and you like that feeling of body connection. Maybe you want to notice that. And you may or may not have your eyes closed. I have my eyes closed. So in that case, let's go for listening. Let's use our ears and notice just any sound. What is a sound that you notice right now? I notice the sound, the gentle hum of a fan. So just practicing saying right now, something that I hear is. And then depending on what's around you, there might be a sound that is less pleasant. Maybe you can orient to that. If there's a sound that you don't particularly love, doesn't feel great to hear. Right now I hear some traffic outside the window. And then let's train our ears to pick up pleasant sound. What is a pleasant sound? For me, it's noticing my exhale. The sound of my exhale feels pleasant to notice. And then we'll shift into using our eyes when you're ready. What is anything that you see? So right now, something that I see is the leaves of my plant that are a bit shriveled up because it's thirsty. And as you look at this thing, you could practice different things. You could practice being with it for a full breath. So looking at it for a full inhale and exhale. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean like, make sure you take a deep breath and exhale. I just mean the timing of it. Like stay there for long enough that you have a full inhale and exhale. We're just practicing being with, slowing things down. And now let's look for something that isn't very pleasant to look at. It's not super nice. I see a pile of clothes on a chair. It's not horrible, but it'd be nicer if it wasn't there. So I'm just looking at it, noticing if that stirs anything up in my body or my mind. And then we're going to practice looking for something that feels pleasant to look at. And it's my boots. I feel happy when I look at my boots. Like I took care in choosing ones that would feel good for my feet. And that is the practice of noticing with our ears and with our eyes. And we sort of did 3 versions of it. One was just noticing anything. One was let's notice something that's not super pleasant. And then one was let's notice something that feels more pleasant. How was that for you?
Lovely. So simple. And so grounding. And so presence-making. In a way that at one time would have driven me insane.
Tell me more about that.
I'm remembering years ago when I lived in Kits and I was kind of learning I guess, to settle down. I was unwinding all of this drama and chaos and ways I used to relate with the world that now feel like heavy and busy and not me. And one of the meditations I practiced was lying on the bed and just noticing. So it was notice thoughts that come up, notice sounds around you, notice sensations in your body. And when you notice them, you simply say to yourself quietly or in your mind, this is what's happening right now. And it was so relieving. Like, it sounded really simple, like simple to the point of being pointless and silly. And it was so relieving.
Mm-hmm. This is what's happening right now. I like that statement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining that that's a deep lesson in acceptance and not adding extra meaning, right?
Yeah.
This is just what's happening right now.
Yeah, this is what's happening. And what a wonderful thing to deploy when one is feeling irritated by something. I remember in that apartment, on the far side of the building, there was a sports bar. It was like one block down from this busy street, and there was a sports bar on the busy street. And it was summertime, and they had, I think it was maybe COVID-y times, they had put a big back deck outside that hadn't been there before. So on a good day previously, you could hear people cheering or hooting or being drunk or whatever, but now it was like 18 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that sound was folded into this is what's happening right now. And it just gave me such a different perspective. Like, if I had been hustling around busily doing whatever I was normally doing, that sort of internal sensory friction would have just been irritating, you know? And I can think of times in my life where I would have yelled at people to shut up. And what a different sentiment that is. Oh, this is what's happening right now.
And the energy that it creates in you when you like use the phrase sensory friction. I mean, that's not a pleasant energy to feel. And then the taking it to the step of let me now shout at people, like that doesn't feel like a pleasant energy. I really like this because it reminds me of a phrase that I learned from one of my teachers, Elia. We were doing a dance movement class together online. And he was, I think, outside in a park or something. And everything was great. And then all of a sudden, I think he said, oh, and there's a chainsaw, I think. That sound you hear, it's a chainsaw. And he said a phrase that's really stuck with me, which is, and that is part of the symphony of the moment. And, you know, for me, that helped me see that there's many components of the moment, just like there's many components that make up a symphony. And that's just one of the things. I could choose to focus on any of the things. And also, this is just what's happening right now. This is the soundtrack of the moment. And in the past, that would have also created tons of sensory friction for me. I would have gotten really irritated and annoyed, wondered why it was happening, when it was going to stop, how I could make it stop, how I could make myself not be bothered by it. And like all my focus would go to it, and it would leave me feeling not so great. And with all the practice of these tools that we practice on this podcast, that we practice in our program, Priming the Body for Peace, I really learned to grow the muscle of directed mindfulness. Like, where am I choosing to place my attention? And also acceptance of this is what's happening right now. I can make it mean whatever I want. And whatever I make it mean is either going to help me feel better or worse. Mm-hmm. And it's really made a difference in my life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so directed mindfulness, we're now talking about the elements we choose to put our focus on in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways that we condition our systems to, I guess we're priming our systems for the sounds and smells and tastes that feel natural for us and that sort of inform our reality. So I think next episode, we're going to talk a bit more about conditioning in those ways. But I want to really specifically today talk about the media we consume, the music we consume, the conversations we consume, and how that informs our nervous system state and our beliefs about the world. And then in turn, what all that does for how we consume the sounds and smells and tastes and whatever of the moment. You know, when I was talking about living in my disconnected, irritated state, those sounds of the bar drove me bonkers. When I'm in a different peaceful state and consuming different media, different information, different worldviews and ways of being, that becomes part of the symphony of the moment, right? Totally different state.
I see. Yeah. And like knowing how to shift ourselves into a state where we can be with what is just happening right now. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that well before. So it would be much more rigid. I would either be completely consumed and overwhelmed by the moment, or I want to protect myself from the moment and try to control all sorts of things, or just cut off from it and just not participate at all and just assume I'm too highly sensitive. I need to get out of here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, highly sensitive is a really important thing. I think people are very quick to cut off from sensory overload when there are definitely tools we can use to incorporate those sensory experiences into the moment without being overwhelmed. So I have in my hand an example of consumption, which is a celery, ginger, cucumber, orange smoothie, which is not the same as consuming like a quadruple Americano, right? It's going to inform my nervous system in a very different way. It's going to start my morning in a very different way. And that has a rolling impact across the board. That was just a random example because I needed a sip of my drink. But really, I kind of want to talk about like YouTube and music specifically for me. Because my previous YouTube life was not a healthy one. I have come from a life of like stress and anger. I'm sure I've talked in the past about having been an accidental lesbian who was like an angry, political, angry person. And definitely the media I consumed was informed by that, you know? And so YouTube would be full of people bitching about whatever political situation or raging against the machine. The music, like Rage Against the Machine, is a good example of the things I used to fill my ears with and the angry sentiment I used to fill my eyes with. And there came a time over doing this work for years. And I would still, you know, at the end of the day, it was like, well, this is what I'm used to. These are the people I like to listen to and follow. And you feel like you know them. And, you know, I wonder what's happening in the world kind of thing. And one day it just felt yucky enough that I unsubscribed to everyone and created a whole new YouTube life that involved like alpha, theta, binaural brainwave things and angel music and things that in the past my body and mind and ears had no space for because it wasn't what I was accustomed to.
What have you noticed is the impact of shifting into consuming different things?
Well, I think it's a symbiotic relationship, right? It goes both ways. When I'm listening to something soothing, my system is soothed. And then I seek out more soothing things. But it took work to get there. In the past, when I was wanting to hear whatever, I'll again say Rage Against the Machine, although I didn't really, I mean, you know, everybody knows Rage Against the Machine, but I wasn't like a big fan. But if that was what I was accustomed to and wanting to listen to, if you turned on angel music, I felt like irritated and angsty physically. My system was not primed for that. So it felt irritation, even though it was like technically and physiologically soothing to the senses. So I notice a calmer sensation when I'm listening to these things. And then that's reflected in the world around me.
Do you enjoy, like, do you notice a difference between whether you enjoy a calmer experience more now than you used to?
Definitely. Yeah. I was not primed for any sort of peace in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the world as a scary, dangerous place to be defended against. And so that was the experience that I had.
And did you desire peace at that time, or did you not even think it was within reach, or was peace something dumb, or like what was your relationship
Definitely.
with it?
Yeah, not within reach. I think my relationship with it probably constituted something like Miss Universe pageant contestants saying, "I want world peace," and me thinking that was stupid and impossible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And without really huge circumstances changing in your life, just practicing orienting to more peaceful, soothing things and learning how to become familiar with it, allowing your body to enjoy it and find safety and comfort in it and actually crave it. That's given you more peace in your life, like a more sense of calm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. As I start to notice how much better that felt in my body, I then sought it out in the world. I started having kind of discordant experiences where the people and experiences I might have favored before didn't feel good anymore. And that feeling
Mm-hmm.
of peace and love and trust and kindness I noticed in other places. So I would orient more towards those places and people. And this is
Mm-hmm.
the creating your reality thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's all the things are out there, and the people and places you choose to orient towards are what you're going to be experiencing. It doesn't mean all those less peaceful things go away. It just means
Mm-hmm.
they're not in your sphere of experience in that time that you're not oriented toward them.
Well, I think that's what's really neat is you're reminding us that it's peace is available to us to orient to notice around us if we want to. We live a very privileged and safe life here in this part of the world where we live, where peace is available, readily available to orient to if we want to. And I think we probably are not accustomed to doing it enough and realizing how much it impacts our nervous system state and our well-being to practice looking at and listening to things that feel pleasant.
Yeah, it's absolutely available. Yeah.
Right? I was
I
going to
think
say we
it's
work with people too who don't get the privilege of living in a safe country.
yeah.
And there might be safe things or pleasant things for them to seek out and orient to, but definitely not in abundance like we have here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's two things I want to say to that is that these people we're working with who are in these circumstances are finding that peace within their bodies and their minds, right? And no matter what our external circumstances are, there is that space inside yourself that you can access if you choose to and develop the capacity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is about not squandering privilege, right? It's such a beautiful thing that we happen to have been born into the privilege that we have. And to ignore that or to not value it highly and take advantage seems like a shame to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. We have lots of pleasant things that are in front of our faces every day.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I walk someone through this practice, they're pleasantly surprised at how just scanning the space and finding something that is pleasant to look at. Like we can practice that together right now, actually. Scan your space and let your eyes land on something that's pleasant to look at. For me, it's the trees shining on the sun shining on the trees. And if I look even closer, I can see the petals, the leaves actually blowing in the wind. And just looking at that, I can feel the smile that comes on my face. And so notice how pleasant shows up in your body, whether it's all in your face, in your smile, somewhere inside your body. Maybe it changes your breath. And see if there's a willingness to allow yourself to enjoy that feeling for 1 or 3 more breaths. and notice how that feels. And I suggest 1 or 3 because sometimes 3 feels like a stretch. Like I noticed at like the edge of 3, like my attention wanted to be pulled somewhere else. Like it was harder than the first 2 breaths, but it felt like I had capacity enough just to stay that extra half a breath there. But like if that feels too far out of reach because your body is more accustomed to stress and chaos and ickiness, just try for 1 breath. And each breath we stay longer in that moment of enjoying something pleasurable, you grow your capacity to live in goodness. That you wire up your body to find safety and ease and pleasure.
Yeah.
Right. Our bodies are so accustomed to tension and stress and chaos.
Yeah. And that's the great shifting of experience that I think we're talking about as well, right? Each breath, it's like a drop in the bucket that accrues over time and then shifts your perspective. It's not like you're going to take 1 breath and your whole perspective is going to shift right there. It will for a moment. And it's an accrual over time that is incredibly powerful. And I honestly would not have believed to have been possible, but here we are.
Here we are. And like, I was just working with someone who, self-admittedly like really struggles with anxiety and perfectionism. And I think she would say the majority of her day, like what she's been used to, is feeling tension and fear all day long. And so she said, I want to practice shifting out of this pattern, these patterns, this rigidity that I have in trying to control things in order to try to create some sorts of safety. And before we looked at any of those patterns, we just practiced like, can we notice something that feels pleasant just for 1 breath? And we chatted about like what difference that could make in her life if she were to do that just once a day and then several times a day. And there came the realization of like, wow, like I could have some serious reprieve, right? From this usual feeling I have of overwhelming anxiety.
Yeah.
Just from looking at something that's pleasant, just from thinking of something that's pleasant and letting myself be in that for just 1 breath.
Yeah, totally. It's making me think of people in wars having pictures of loved ones in their pocket that they look at. People in prison having pictures of loved ones or the beach. And then that makes me think about what we have in our spaces as well. There's a lot of things that I love and that I don't want in my space. Like I love bright, vibrant, colorful things. And my home used to be full of bright, vibrant, colorful things. And I love them, and looking at them, makes me feel good in certain ways, but not like peaceful and soothed the way I want to feel in my home. There's so much power in that,
Yeah, that's really neat. That made me think of something. What did I want to say? So recently I was cleaning out my car and I came upon something like sort of just tucked away, and like it was, I pulled it out, and guess what it was? What? It was your picture from like grade 2 or whatever. Do you remember giving that to me?
Adorable.
And instantly a smile came on my face. And I was like, that's so nice. This makes me smile. This picture of Stephanie in her grade 2 or whatever it was, school photo. And it totally changed the moment. Like it softened the moment. Like I felt a love and appreciation for you. I laughed because I thought it was funny. It surprised me. I didn't expect it. I was like going through like cleaning out my car, not the funnest activity. And it was such a pleasant surprise. And what's neat is none of my circumstances of my life changed. None of the stresses were taken away. None of my like responsibilities were taken off my plate. But in that moment, I had such a sweet moment that wouldn't have happened if I didn't see your face. And so this now reminds me of like how we can be much more intentional about putting things around us that elicit that nice feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I remember going through a really hard time in life for a couple of years were just rough. And I think they were rough also during COVID when we couldn't be around people in the same way as we were used to. And I would just imagine you or Shalina close to me. So just in my imagination, right? It felt good, right? So even we can practice that right now if you want to. Just imagine someone who you love and adore, who like really loves you and cares for you. Imagine they're just in your space, right? How does it feel? What happens? Does a smile come across your face? Does it feel warm inside? Does your breath deepen? Does your body soften? What happens when you imagine someone who you really care about and they really care about you and they're just in your vision? And if it creates something that is easeful, even decent or pleasurable, like, can you allow yourself to enjoy it for that breath or 3? And every time I walk someone through that practice, they feel a state shift. They feel something different happen in their body. And I always like to highlight, and we did not change any of the circumstances of your life. Yet you just had a moment. And for some people, it's just a moment of pleasure and joy. But I also like to highlight, like, for some people, it's a real moment of reprieve from feeling heavy things, hard to feel things. Right? So there's that.
Yeah. I think letting that shift naturally is also important. And like recognizing that the medicine of the moment might be different moment to moment, you know? I'm thinking about the car because of your mention of the car. And inside my car in the visor, I keep a picture of a grinning, delighted man who's got a baby goat on his shoulders. And when I need a good feeling, I can look at him and it's immediate. It's unavoidable. You can't be delighted when you look at this picture. Help but be delighted. And then that made me think about the car radio. Usually I've got my Bluetooth connected and I'm listening to something on YouTube Music. But this past week I felt like listening to the radio, which is pretty unusual for me because advertising on the radio and radio announcer banter typically drives me pretty bonkers. So I'm always switching, trying to find music that doesn't drive me bonkers. And this week I've found myself wanting to listen to some of the banter and wanting to listen to the radio. So like letting that happen, you know, noticing what feels good in the moment and letting that happen.
I think that's what's nice is we don't have to define ourselves by I only enjoy this or only this is soothing, right? Things can change.
Totally.
What did I want to say? I want to talk about your green juice. Can we talk about your green juice?
Yes, we can.
Because I think there was a time when there wasn't an appreciation for green juice or it just wasn't a reality in your day. Right? And I remember, like, I don't know if I was the person that sort of brought it into your day more, or I was just the person that would remind you that you liked it and you brought it into your day more. But I remember you saying, like, I like spending time with you because something along those lines, because like when I'm with you, it's easier for me to take better care of myself, or it's easier for me to crave these things that feel good for my body. And so that just made me think of like the people we choose to surround ourselves with and like how that helps jumpstart certain habits and behaviors that are supportive for us. I don't know if you want to share anything on that.
Sure. I mean, gosh, I definitely have I tend towards a variety of behaviors depending on who I'm with and what I'm doing. And I've definitely noticed there are people in my life who I love, who, I don't want to say that they make me want to, because nobody makes us do anything, but what arises within me in their presence is a desire to drink alcohol. And I've recently been away for a couple of months, which also, like, I'm a homebody and home is really important to me. And the little irritation that's generated from not having these comforts also makes me want to drink alcohol. And I used to drink a lot, and I don't drink much anymore. And if I do, it's a small amount. But I still was noticing, like, oh, my desire is to have 2 ounces of Gateau Negro red wine. It's 2 ounces because I did the Jenny Craig diet a while ago, and that was or whatever, Weight Watchers, that was a Weight Watchers friendly amount, and that just stuck. Anyway, a couple nights ago, I noticed the desire for herbal tea. And I was like, oh, thank God, I'm home, you know? Like, I know what arises within me when I'm in a healthy space and when I've got this like low level irritation that I think I certainly wouldn't have been conscious of before. And it's not a huge predominant thing. Like, I don't feel outwardly irritated. It's just, it gives rise to these unhealthy aspects, or not, they're not horribly unhealthy or anything, but it's just not the best parts of me that I want to be bringing forward. Yeah, and you're definitely a catalyst of health and delights and celery and ginger. And also my blender is out of storage now because my house is being renovated, so everything is away, and I finally brought out my blender, and hallelujah, we have a smoothie.
I love it. I love the reminder that we have different people in our lives for different reasons. And how to, I'm going to say use, but I don't mean use in a taking advantage in a bad way, but like, how do we use that in a way that feels supportive for us? Mm-hmm. Right? If you know that being around a certain person elicits something in you that's good and supportive, are you prioritizing being around this person? Mm-hmm. Right? Or you notice, hey, I'm doing actually the opposite. I'm prioritizing people who elicit wanting to have fun all night long, which is also a great thing. If that works for you for that season of life, or that timing for that night, great. But you might notice that's out of balance, or that there's no intention put into who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we could call it inspiration. What is inspired within you, depending on people, places, media, food, drink, what's inspired. Yes.
Can I share a little bit of auditory consumption and what it inspires me? Okay, so I sort of just theoretically understood if you listen to negative things, you're probably not going to feel so happy and positive and optimistic. If you listen to happier, more positive things, you're probably going to be more open to possibility and feel a little bit more lighter and optimistic and all those kinds of things. That seemed obvious to me. What I didn't realize was what happens when you listen to nothing.
Right.
What happens when I let my own brain be the soundtrack of the moment. And my brain has strengthened some pathways now to be much kinder to myself, much more trusting of life and the world and the unfolding of things. But in the past, it was really colored by voices from childhood, expectations that I thought were put upon me, expectations that were actually put upon me. And I realized that my soundtrack of my own brain at the time was not super supportive or helpful. And I would get into times where I wouldn't get depressed, but I just felt a lower level vibration of energy, lower sense of optimism, a lower sense of drive to make important things happen. And I really noticed it in those gaps of times, because sometimes I get really into listening to a podcast or, you know, a speaker, and it's just nice to hear some things that remind me of what's important to me. And it helps me stay focused in terms of what I do to support those things that are important to me. And then I just, like everyone, fall out of routine sometimes and like not really listening to anything. And then one day I'll remember, I'm like, oh, I haven't really listened to something like on purpose, intentionally for a while. Like, what do I want to listen to? And then immediately I notice, oh, it wakes up something in me. Like, wait, that's what you're talking about. It wakes something up in you. Mm-hmm. And I realized I don't get that wake up in the same way if it's just left to my own brain.
Yeah.
Sometimes my own brain sort of goes more just duller, less colorful, less vibrant if I don't add a little something to it through an audiobook or, an interview that I'm listening to, or just something auditory that I notice that a lot. A podcast. So I have learned to be intentional about what I choose to consume in terms of what I'm listening to each day, because it makes a huge difference in how I feel, the amount of energy that I have, whether I'm focused on what's important to me or whether I get lost in some of the things that really don't make a difference in life, but I feel like I'm going to dedicate all this thought to it. Yeah. So that was a really powerful thing for me. Be intentional each day about what I choose to consume in terms of what I'm listening to, not just to cut out negative, but to actually bring in things that are supportive.
Totally. And I think, so that's making me think of this old YouTube content that I used to enjoy, which was basically talking heads bitching about political things. Because socio-political stuff really does interest me. But the way that they spoke about things didn't feel good, And to my surprise, there also exists a whole world of people talking about these things through a compassionate lens. And I wouldn't have thought that that was possible, but because I've opened up to that, algorithms catch up or whatever. So I started being exposed to the sort of content that interested me, but delivered in a way that also felt good. So yeah, just a note to open up to possibilities.
I like that discernment, that the topic interested you, but the way it was delivered didn't feel good. And that doesn't mean there's nothing that bridges those two in a way that feels good. And it reminds me of, we're lucky enough to have so much access to information, where we live, that if you're willing to go look for it, it probably exists. Right? But if you assume it only exists in these forms, that's probably all you're going to see.
Yeah, the echo chamber.
Right? And even in terms of what you can aspire to, right? When you said there was a time in my life where I the idea of calm and peace seemed out of reach, not reality, right? I remember working with someone who said, I grew up with no examples of healthy relationships. I haven't experienced any healthy, intimate relationships. And so I feel like I should just stay in this one that I actually sort of know is unhealthy, because I don't actually really have any proof that it could be any better, because aren't we all flawed as humans? And so shouldn't I just suck it up and just live with this, because sometimes things are good. And so we chatted about whether she was, we chatted about how all that made sense first, but we also chatted about whether she was open to discovering what's out there. And I think I had asked her, how much time in the last year, how many months do you think you've spent on just feeling crappy in this relationship? It's all year, or a lot of it. So what if we just were to spend 1 month? Imagine you spent 1 month really seriously, to an extreme even, of you're going to go out and canvas the world out there, your friends, your acquaintances, the internet, dissertations, whatever you have access to, movies, real life, fake life, I don't care. If you're really to dedicate a month of really looking for evidence that there are healthy and good and strong and supportive relationships out there, that it actually exists as a thing, do you think you'd find something maybe? She's like, yeah, I probably would. And it's just a good reminder. It's easy to get stuck in the, I can't see it, so it must not exist. I can't see it in my current places where I look.
Yeah.
So it must not exist as a possibility. And I think as humans, yeah, it's great to believe and have faith and just trust in the unfolding. But sometimes we need to see what's possible.
Yeah.
Right? to like wake something up in us that like, oh, maybe I could have that too.
For sure. Maybe I could have that too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the way people answer that question is so revealing, right? Imagine, okay, let me see. I'm thinking about people who really didn't know that what they wanted was possible, discovering that it is, and just being straight up delighted and excited for what's possible. But I think when we're talking about things like this, mostly the answer is delivered kind of the way you delivered it. Like, oh, yeah, I'd probably find exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Our belief
Yep.
systems.
Mm-hmm. And then once we orient to, like, noticing what you orient to, like, do I orient to people who generally show me like no good things are possible? Or do I orient to, wow, I see that that's possible. So maybe, even maybe, not it's possible for me, even maybe it could be possible for me.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
This makes me think about the energy of what I experience with you and Shalina specifically. I'm sure there's more people too, but we're just, everything is possible. You know, anything I suggest I maybe want to do or see or discover, you're just like, wow, that sounds great. You know, there's zero negative feedback about it. There's no doubt inserted. It's just this like wonder and delight, and how inspiring that is, and how counterintuitive it is to my experience. You know, I'm constantly expecting to be like, I guess, admonished or like told my thoughts are silly and there's going to be a problem. Always anticipating problems, you know, never just diving in excitedly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like that's one of my things that is fun to access for me. Like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah. Great. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this for a long time. And I feel like the construction sounds, which you may or may not be able to hear, are very distracting and driving me bonkers. And I'm having trouble talking and focusing. So
Okay.
I suggest we wrap this up and come back next week. What do you think?
Okay. I think that sounds great. I would not like to admonish you and make you feel horrible about your suggestion.
Thank you.
Your peace matters to me.
Oh, thank you.
That too. Choose people in your life who your peace matters to. Yeah. They want to contribute to adding more peace into your life.
Yeah. Actually, I do want to say one more thing. This is reminding me of someone who stops smoking and the support or the opposite of support that they get from people who are still smoking and who unconsciously want this person to continue smoking. So it won't be, hey, good for you, you know, maybe it will be, but often it'll be, you know, oh, yeah, see you next week when you've given up, you're giving up smoking, sort of thing. Yeah, and the subconscious feedback loop that's in there for people and our patterns, the familiar patterns that we've treaded, and wanting to step outside of those poses, you know, some challenges and opportunities.
I like that. Well,
could you lead us through a practice that reminds me that these noises are fine? So many noises.
Yep. Let's go with adding in some touch that feels pleasant right now. Right? And sometimes we think, when I say touch, we think, oh, I got to touch, put hands on my body somewhere, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nourishing touch is beautiful. But someone on a call today said, you know, I was driving in the car, super stressful in the city that I live in. And like, I remembered thinking about cats and how cats like to stretch out, and they stretch their arms out like this, she said. She's like, so I just stretched my arms out like that and pushed them against the steering wheel. And all of a sudden I felt so good. That was such a good feeling. So that's also possible. So we're just practicing creating a good feeling in your body, using the sensory element of touch, right? So it could be touch on your body, it could be touch onto a surface. And just noticing how it feels to bring in some comfort through touch that also is now part of the symphony of the moment. And if you want to imagine something in your mind, that's also a pleasant thing to visualize. How could that be another element of the symphony in the moment? And then I'll go with, can you remind yourself that it will end? And when it does, though, and this is the thing, often we forget it ends. And then when it ends, when we have reprieve, we don't savor the reprieve. So I would love to offer you the suggestion of when it does end, can you stay in that enjoyment of reprieve for an extra breath or 3?
I was imagining cuddling with a cat.
Mm.
And then I was imagining the quiet that will return. And I know I appreciate that very consciously when it happens. And then I realized I will one day actually cuddle a cat again. And that will be so nice also.
Look at that. And nothing actually changed in your life, but there was some reprieve. And I see a smile on your face. And this reminds me to talk about the power of imagination. I always thought I was bad at imagination, bad at visualization. And the reality is, for all of us, I'm pretty confident, we're all very good at imagination. We do it all day long. We're very good at imagining the worst case scenario. We're very good at imagining crappy feeling things because we do it all the time. And so if we're already good at imagining, how about using that imagining muscle for something that feels a little bit better, at least sometimes, a little reprieve.
That's powerful stuff. Thank you, Gigi. Anything else you want to say?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay, good. Well, okay, so I'm trying to insert this new reminder at the end of every episode that you can follow us on Instagram at Wholehearted Loving. And you can visit our website, which is wholeheartedloving.com. And you can join our program where we practice these things together and tailor practices for you and whatever you're experiencing in the moment that you need support with. And thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week. Please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Can I add a little bit of something?
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I like about our Instagram is that it gives a little summary of what's in an episode, but I like that it gives some reflection questions. So if you're into that, or you want to get to know yourself a little bit better, every episode comes with reflection questions.
Yes. That is entirely the point of why I wanted to mention Instagram, and I just forgot. If you want weekly self-reflection questions, follow us on Instagram at Wholehearted Loving. That's what I'm going to start saying at the end of every episode. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.